From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. First, the headlines. UN declares March 15th International Day to Combat Islamophobia. Justice for All condemns Indian court ruling to maintain hijab ban in schools. CIA tortured Muslim detainee to train other interrogators. China admits worst situation since COVID-19 began. U.S. Senate unanimously agrees to make daylight savings time permanent. Today marks 19th anniversary of the murder of Rachel Corrie. Our top story tonight. The United Nations has declared March 15th International Day to Combat Islamophobia. The resolution, introduced by Pakistan, marks the day in 2019 when a white supremacist Australian gunman killed 51 Muslims and wounded 40 others in 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. Pakistan's UN envoy Munir Akram said anti-Muslim hatred is proliferating in parts of the world. An Indian representative expressed concern over recognizing the phobia against one religion while excluding others. The resolution, proposed by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, was adopted by consensus. It was backed by 57 OIC members and 8 other countries, including China and Russia. Justice for All, the largest human rights organization led by American Muslims, and the Council on American Islamic Relations today condemned India's Karnataka High Court ruling that hijab is not an essential part of Islam. Since January, Muslim girls in the southern Indian state have not been allowed in school wearing a hijab. There are over 200 million Muslims in India, many of whom observe wearing a headscarf as part of their faith. The Pew Research Center has found 60% of Hindu women also cover their head. Justice for All Save India campaign said this is the latest chapter in the country's utter disregard for religious freedom. The CIA used a black site detainee as a training prop to teach interrogators torture techniques, a newly declassified U.S. government report revealed. Ammar al-Balochi, a CIA detainee in Afghanistan, was slammed against a plywood wall repeatedly by trainees so they could get certified, according to the report. Al-Balochi's head was injured as a result of the repeated abuse, leaving him with brain damage. The report contains several documents dating back to 2008, revealing details of torture faced by the 44-year-old Kuwaiti citizen. It was declassified on March 10th as part of a court filing by Al-Balochi's lawyers seeking to get him an independent medical examination. A new analysis of United States naturalization data reveals how often applications for citizenship are denied based on racial, ethnic, gender, and religious identities. It found that among those seeking U.S. citizenship, women are favored over men, white people are favored over people of color, and non-Muslims are favored over Muslims. The study, published February 22nd in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences USA, relied on information obtained from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The data was acquired through a Freedom of Information Act request by the study's first author, Emily Rayo, a professor of law and sociology at the University of Southern California. It covers a period of October 2014 through March 2018. France has closed another mosque for a 6-month period amid an ongoing assault against Muslims and their places of worship in the country. The Al Farouk Mosque in Pessac district near Bordeaux in southwestern France was closed for allegedly defending radical Islam and spreading Salafist ideology, officials said Monday. A statement from the Gironde Governorate accused mosque authorities of giving sermons calling for non-compliance with French laws and legitimizing terrorist attacks. It also accused them of spreading messages containing hate against Israel, as well as supporting terrorist organizations or people who defend what they call radical Islam. In August, France's highest constitutional authority approved a controversial anti-separatism law that has been criticized for singling out Muslims. The bill was passed by the National Assembly in July, despite strong opposition from lawmakers on opposite sides of the political spectrum. France has since shut down almost 100 mosques. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that his country's military campaign in Ukraine is developing successfully and that he will not allow the country to become a springboard used to threaten Russia. Zelensky invoked Pearl Harbor and 9/11 in a plea for U.S. help against Russia while addressing U.S. Congress. President Biden announced more aid in response. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia and Ukraine are close to agreeing on neutral status. Washington's sanctions on Russia may affect Europe more than the U.S., an expert warns. Harry Dimitris, a senior fellow at the U.S.-based Atlantic Council, told Anadolu Agency that Europe has much greater dependence on Russian gas. He added that when it comes to the war in Ukraine, that's why we see them being much more pragmatic about it, much more reserved in passing judgment quickly, simply because the consequences are going to be immediate and grave to them. More than 100 environmental and human rights groups sent a letter Tuesday to U.S. President Joe Biden urging him to pardon American attorney Stephen Donziger. Donziger is under house arrest for refusing to hand over privileged client information in a high-profile environmental case. In the letter, the groups decry the prosecution of Donziger, who has been jailed at home and in a federal prison since 2019. They claim it is retaliation for his work defending the rights of indigenous peoples in Ecuador who were victims of Chevron Corporation's oil dumping. Donziger represented tens of thousands of Ecuadorian farmers and indigenous people in a class action lawsuit against Chevron, resulting in a multi-billion-dollar judgment. Chevron's subsidiary Texaco dumped more than 16 billion gallons of toxic wastewater into rivers and pits in the Amazon rainforest, according to the lawsuit. We're bringing more news stories after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Yemeni refugees in the central Ma'arib province on Tuesday appealed for humanitarian aid and protection from Houthi rebel attacks. Refugees in Al-Sumayya camp, south of Ma'arib, said they were forced to leave their homes to flee Houthi rocket and drone attacks. They say more than 1,800 families in the camp lack basic necessities amid an absence of support from UN aid agencies. In a statement, the refugees called on the Yemeni government to rally international support to provide protection against Houthi attacks. The Houthi group did not comment on the statement. Yemen has been engulfed by violence and instability since 2014, when Houthi rebels aligned with Iran captured much of the country. Chinese health officials on Tuesday admitted the COVID-19 situation there is grim and complex amid a dramatic rise in daily cases. Out of 31 Chinese provinces, 28 have reported a rise in coronavirus cases starting last week. An official with the National Health Commission said affected provinces and cities are dealing with it in an orderly and favorable way and assured the epidemic is under control. The Chinese mainland has reported 15,000 coronavirus cases this month, the official said. Health officials said China on Tuesday reported over 5,000 cases, including more than 1,600 silent carriers. The infection has surged significantly for the first time in 2 years since the pandemic began. The U.S. Senate on Tuesday unanimously approved an act to make daylight savings time permanent nationwide. Several legislative efforts to permanently extend daylight hours have faltered in the past. The Senate's unanimous approval of the Sunshine Protection Act is a major milestone in the effort. It comes 2 days after Americans across much of the country turn their clocks forward by an hour early Sunday. The U.S. House of Representatives must still review and pass the measure before it can be sent to President Joe Biden to be signed into law. If passed, the act would not be implemented until November 2023 to accommodate transit and broadcast schedules. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, called for a hate crime investigation into alleged racist vandalism targeting a black family in West Allis, Wisconsin. The tires of the family's car were reportedly slashed and a window was smashed, according to the Muslim Civil Rights and Advocacy Group. The vandal also left a hate note on the car, threatening the family and using the N-word, the group said. The family's car has reportedly been targeted 5 times this year by vandals. Police said they are conducting an investigation of the incident. CAIR's National Communications Director Ibrahim Hooper said the attacks demonstrate the seriousness of the threat posed by racism and white supremacy nationwide. Today marks the 19th anniversary of the murder of American peace activist Rachel Corrie. Corrie was 23 when she was crushed to death by an Israeli soldier who was bulldozing a Palestinian family's home in Rafah in Gaza. Originally from Olympia, Washington, Corrie was a member of the International Solidarity Movement. That is a Palestinian-led movement dedicated to using nonviolent protests against the Israeli military in the West Bank and Gaza. While a 2003 Israeli military investigation claimed that Corrie's death was an accident, human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch dispute that. Meanwhile, 3 young Palestinian men were killed Tuesday morning by Israeli occupation forces in separate incidents in the West Bank and Negev. Local sources said 1 man was shot dead and 7 others suffered bullet injuries during an operation to arrest a wanted citizen in Balata refugee camp east of Nablus. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid in Chicago. Just like you, I was moved by that Allahu Akbar lady. She stood her ground, fearful of none, for her hijab and for her education. Sisters and brothers, Indian Muslims are facing a genocide. India does not care for Muslim protesting, but it does care for the world opinion. Therefore, we must push the United Nations. The UN has a responsibility to protect. They must prevent genocide. Please sign this UN petition now. Get others to sign. It will help. Trust me, it will help. We need 1 million signatures, brothers and sisters. Please sign now.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs,
and that's still not enough to put food on the table.
I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. It's time for our in-depth analysis segment. Let's watch.
America has something called indefinite detention of American citizens, which was signed into law by President Obama, who also put a note there, my administration will not implement it. But there are people who are not American citizens. That's almost all the humanity. And some of those people which we purchased by paying people, and some of them we picked up ourselves and put them somewhere between Cuba and the United States of America, thinking that is the safe place, close to home, is still there. And we have done all sorts of things. We invented new torture methods, but a whole lot of people are innocent. They have never been tried. They have never been subjected to any judicial process whatsoever. Human Rights Watch has been concerned about that, and they have issued a recent report. With us is LETTA TAYLER. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to join you today to talk about this really important and deeply disturbing topic. And I was quite interested in something you said as we were chatting before the show began, which is that you were asking, how will history judge Guantanamo and the U.S. operation of Guantanamo? And if I may, I'd like to comment on that to start with, because history will judge the United States for the continued operation of Guantanamo 20 years to the day on Tuesday, from when they first opened it to indefinitely and unlawfully detain foreign Muslim men and boys without due process and often in very abusive circumstances. This is a blight on U.S. moral authority. It's a recruitment card to armed extremist groups who can use this to fuel their arguments that the U.S. does not value Muslim life. And it is undermining the entire international human rights system. So history will very much judge the U.S. for Guantanamo. I think it will judge not only President Bush, but President Obama, who promised to close Guantanamo and failed. It will judge President Trump, who, of course, was delighted with Guantanamo. And if Joe Biden does not act soon, history will judge Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, the current U.S. president, as well.
You mentioned, Letta, a couple of times Muslim men and boys. Has America ever indefinitely detained any other people other than Muslim men and boys?
That's a very good question. I think the answer is yes, in that we have seen gross, egregious violations of human rights in the detention of people of color in the U.S. This can be immigration detention. It can also be criminal detention in U.S. facilities. And we have seen an egregious pattern of abuse towards people of color historically in their arrest and detention operations in the United States. So I would not say that this is exclusively the U.S. is not exclusively targeting Muslims. However, in terms of its post 9/11 counterterrorism operations, overwhelmingly, those detained, those tortured, those denied due process have been Muslim. Most of them men, but also some women and some children.
You mentioned children and boys. But didn't the person and the officer detaining them or arresting them, transferring them, realize these are children?
The officers who are arresting are not necessarily. One thing that I'll back up for a moment. One of the things that is outrageous about the continued operation of Guantanamo and all the other abuses during the U.S.-led so-called global war on terrorism is that no one has been held accountable for the grave abuses, in some cases taking of human life during torture, and including in CIA black sites. So nobody's been held accountable except some very small fish, some small fry in the whole operation. So yes, it may be that those actually doing the arrests and the handovers were officers who realized that some of these detainees were boys. But think of who are the key architects. President George W. Bush knew what was going on. His defense secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, his vice president, Dick Cheney, his Office of Legal Counsel, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they bended themselves into a pretzel to circumvent the law, to try to get away with it. And many of the abuses that they committed went up to the Supreme Court, which overturned them in part. So, yes, I think everybody knew exactly what they were doing who was involved in this despicable, horrific number of violations in the war on terror, including the unlawful detention of children.
Letta, how many of the prisoners are still in Guantanamo Bay? Some have been regularly released, right?
Yes, that's correct. I wouldn't say regularly. It took several years, really, for a stream of releases to begin, and that was really under President Obama. But a total of 780, mostly men, but also some boys, have passed through Guantanamo, and many were detained for months or years before they were released. There are currently 93 men who remain, and 27 of them have yet to be charged with any crime. And many of them have been in there for more than a dozen or 15 years. Now, on top of that, the 5 accused in the 9/11, in the September 11 attacks, are also held at Guantanamo. They're among the few men who've actually been charged with any crime. But the commissions that the U.S. has created to try them, to prosecute them, were created to really circumvent the regular U.S. legal system. And there are so many flaws in the Guantanamo military commissions that the 5 men accused of 9/11 haven't even been brought to trial yet. All of the whole case is caught up in pretrial hearings and mostly going back and forth over allegations of torture, because these defendants were tortured. And in addition to allegations of unlawful eavesdropping by the Central Intelligence Agency on attorney-client privilege, on attorney-client conversations that were privileged and private. So all of this is ensnaring the effort to bring anyone who actually was responsible for the 9/11 attacks to justice. So on the one hand, you have all of these detainees who've been abused by the United States. And on the other hand, you have all of the survivors of the 9/11 attacks and the family members of those who died in the 9/11 attacks. And there were 3,000 people who died and counting, and they haven't seen justice. So nobody is coming out ahead with the continued operation of Guantanamo, except perhaps armed extremist groups that can use the injustices at Guantanamo, the continuing injustices, as a recruitment card.
So Letta Taylor is with the Human Rights Watch. President after president have failed to close this. Obama wanted to. I think President Biden also wants to. But what are the factors which are stopping them from closing it down?
Well, Obama himself admitted later on that he really lacked the courage to push ahead with Guantanamo, and he made choices to pursue other agendas domestically, such as trying to get national health care for all, which is, of course, a worthy cause. But it really didn't have to be one or the other. When Obama came to power, he had a majority in both houses of the U.S. Congress. That's our legislative body. And he could have pushed through far more robust reforms on counterterrorism, including, if not entirely closing Guantanamo, certainly going farther than he did. So Obama tried, but lacked the courage to keep on going. And then once he, I think, woke up to the fact that he really ought to, he didn't have a majority in Congress anymore. Biden is also dealing with a tricky political situation with the U.S. Congress, which is banned prosecutions on the domestic mainland, on U.S. soil, for trials of any of the Guantanamo detainees. However, there's plenty he could do. For example, he could prosecute through Zoom or some other video conferencing mechanism. That's what they're doing with a lot of the pretrial procedures anyway at Guantanamo. He could pursue plea agreements with the 9/11 defendants and other people who are accused, who I can't speak for them whether they'd agree or not, but they've all got lawyers. They've got excellent lawyers, and nobody's tried that. So there's a lot that he could do, and he could push hard with Congress to make a deal. I think there's plenty he could do, and he's just not so far. So we're really hoping that this new year, this 21st year of Guantanamo, will be a turning point for President Biden, and that he'll do the right thing, close Guantanamo, prosecute anyone who needs prosecution through U.S. federal courts, rather than these shams of a trial system called the military commission system at Guantanamo, and that he'll transfer the men out of Guantanamo who have yet to be charged with a crime, these 27 men. They should not be held indefinitely.
Letta, tell me this. Those people who were found innocent, and yes, not regularly, but eventually a good number of them got released. What is their life like?
For many of these men, life has been miserable since Guantanamo. Many are ostracized by their communities, by their families. They can't find a wife. Or perhaps their families, including their wives, have left them long ago. Their children have grown up and are strangers to them. It's hard for them to find work. Some of them are not able to move freely within the countries where they've been transferred. Some have been transferred back to home countries where they feared abuse, including torture. And so it's been extremely difficult for many, many, many of the Guantanamo detainees to pick up their lives. Many of them suffer severe trauma still to this day from the torture that they endured and the years of incarceration at Guantanamo, often under abusive conditions as well, such as force feeding. So they have a lot of wounds that still need healing in many cases. And the U.S. owes them apologies and redress. The U.S. should be helping fund and ensure that they obtain the psychosocial and medical care that they really need to get on with their lives.
Is there any possibility of any compensation or assistance in rehabilitating hundreds of people who were found innocent and finally released?
Yes. Well, I would say that these men were not necessarily, and I believe they were all men by the time they were released, including those who entered as boys. They weren't necessarily found innocent, but they were not prosecuted and they were cleared for transfer or release, meaning the U.S. government didn't have enough evidence, if any evidence, against them. So, and innocent. By default, I think you could argue that they were found innocent in that sense, but it's not that they went to trial and were acquitted. I just wanted to make that distinction. But for all of those who were released and never charged with a crime, it's imperative that the Biden administration and issue formal apologies and assist rehabilitation and reintegration. But so far, we've seen really no appetite for that. And this is unconscionable. This sends such a shocking and dangerous message to the rest of the world that the U.S. is willing to dispense with its responsibilities and protections for human rights when it comes to foreign Muslims. Really, it's an incredibly, in addition to being immoral, unconscionable and unlawful, it's just an incredibly dangerous message. So Human Rights Watch and many other organizations, sister organizations, we are continuing to step up the pressure on the U.S. authorities to do the right thing by these men.
Well, thank you so much, Letta Taylor, for your time. Letta Taylor with the Human Rights Watch, who just issued, under her leadership, a report about Guantanamo Bay.
It was my honor to join you. Thank you so much on behalf of me and Human Rights Watch.
That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.